Welcome to the Explainer. Look, let's just dive right in because today we are tackling something absolutely massive. We're decoding the literal blueprint of psychological manipulation. We're going to unmask those invisible forces and completely unseen tactics that people use, sometimes on purpose, but honestly, sometimes completely unconsciously, to shape human behavior every single day. I promise you, by the end of this Explainer, you're going to see the world and all your interactions in a fundamentally different light. I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling, I don't know, kind of confused, or maybe weirdly guilty, or pressured into doing something you genuinely never intended to do? If you're nodding your head right now, you are definitely not alone. That lingering feeling of doubt, that's your lived experience of an invisible threat. It's the subtle footprint of everyday manipulation, and that is exactly what we are exposing today. So here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We're going to break this down into 6 quick chapters. 1. The invisible threat. 2. Distorting your reality. 3. Weaponizing your emotions. 4. False trust and pressure. 5. Why we fall for it. And finally, reclaiming your power. Let's start with Chapter 1, the invisible threat. Manipulation is quite literally everywhere. From our offices to our personal relationships, psychological influence is just a pervasive reality. And the real danger is that most people don't even notice it's happening until it's way too late. Moving on to Chapter 2, distorting your reality, or breaking down your baseline perception, because before a manipulator can influence you, they first have to warp what you know to be true. Okay, listen to these phrases for a second. You're imagining things that never happened. You're just being too sensitive. Sound familiar? This is gaslighting. It's literally one of the most damaging forms of manipulation out there. When someone drops these classic trigger phrases, their entire goal is to make you question your own memory, your feelings, and your baseline perception of reality. Over time, the victim actually starts doubting their own instincts and becomes totally dependent on the manipulator to tell them what's real. To protect yourself here, you absolutely have to trust documented facts and, above all else, never ignore your gut instinct. You see, manipulators love to rely on an illusion. They might play the victim to totally flip the blame, or use the silent treatment to spin up your anxiety so you apologize, even when you literally did nothing wrong. Your defense against this? Ground yourself in reality. Remember that genuine compassion absolutely requires accountability. Conflicts are only ever solved through open communication, never through emotional withdrawal. Chapter 3, Weaponizing Your Emotions. This is all about using your feelings against you. Once your reality is a little distorted, manipulators will turn your own natural empathy, your love, and your fears into weapons to get exactly what they want. This kind of emotional warfare basically takes 3 distinct forms. First up is guilt tripping. You'll hear stuff like, after everything I've done for you, right? They're trying to make you feel completely responsible for their happiness. The fix? Just remember that kindness is a choice, it is not a binding obligation. Then there's fear manipulation. This is your last chance. This is totally manufactured urgency. Your defense here is to just pause and think rationally. Logic always diffuses panic. And finally, emotional blackmail. If you loved me, you would. Look, that is a threat wearing a mask of affection. Your ultimate defense is knowing that healthy love is never conditional on your complete obedience. All right, Chapter 4, False Trust and Pressure. Manufacturing artificial bonds. If fear and guilt don't do the trick, they'll manufacture fake affection and heavy societal pressure to completely bypass your defenses. The first trap we run into here is love bombing. It's this massive, overwhelming rush of attention, extreme flattery, gifts, and it feels absolutely amazing at first, right? But make no mistake, it is a calculated move to inflate your ego and drop your guard. Once that intense attachment is established, poof, the excessive affection suddenly vanishes, and it's replaced entirely by control. Always be cautious of affection that feels way too intense, way too quickly. Real healthy relationships take time to develop. Another sneaky way they build false trust is through social proof. We're humans. We naturally follow the crowd. So when you hear phrases like, millions trust us, or #1 best-selling, it's designed to completely bypass your critical thinking. They make you feel like you gotta act just because everyone else is doing it, rather than because it's actually the right decision for you. Always stop and ask yourself, am I agreeing to this based on actual evidence, or am I just following the herd? And man, you have got to watch out for the foot in the door technique. It always starts super small. Just 5 minutes of your time. You say yes, then suddenly they need an hour. Next thing you know, you are locked into a major, massive commitment. Why does this work so incredibly well? Because humans desperately want to appear consistent. Reversing that first yes becomes psychologically uncomfortable. So evaluate every single request on its own. A yes yesterday absolutely does not obligate you to a yes today. Chapter 5, Why We Fall for It, the Psychological Vulnerability. What is it that makes all these gaslighting and high-pressure tactics so universally effective against us? Well, it really just comes down to our basic human wiring. We are emotional creatures, you know? We naturally seek acceptance. We are deeply terrified of rejection. And we just desperately desire harmony in our lives. Manipulators understand these desires perfectly. They know exactly which emotional strings to pull to play us like a fiddle. Which brings us to our final chapter, Chapter 6, Reclaiming Your Power Through Awareness and Boundaries. Because you do not have to be a victim to these invisible forces. Here is the absolute most important takeaway today. Awareness changes everything. The literal second you recognize a manipulative tactic, you instantly regain control over your choices. And hey, quick side note, not everyone does this maliciously. Sometimes people manipulate just out of their own insecurities or fears or just learned bad habits. But regardless of their intent, understanding these behaviors is what helps you establish ironclad boundaries. Knowledge is your greatest defense. When you understand human behavior, you become incredibly hard to control and so much easier to empower. So I want to leave you with this question to think about. Which manipulation technique have you actually experienced the most? Was it the subtle reality warp of gaslighting, the crazy sudden high of love bombing, or maybe the heavy weight of a guilt trip? Recognizing your own blind spots is step one in actually applying what we've learned today. So keep your eyes